When you picture the modern pharmaceutical industry, you probably imagine something straight out of like a high-budget sci-fi movie.
Oh, definitely. Pristine, clean rooms, robotic arms, all of that.
Right. You picture these aggressively sterile environments where brilliant scientists are, analyzing synthetic compounds at the molecular level.
Yeah, it's an industry that's entirely defined by absolute cutting-edge precision.
Exactly. Millions of dollars and just countless hours are poured into perfecting a single formulation.
And that precision is really non-negotiable. I mean, we are talking about a field where a fraction of a millimeter in a syringe or even a single misplaced decimal point in a temperature log can literally be the difference between a life-saving treatment and a completely catastrophic clinical trial.
Wow. Yeah, so the margin for error is functionally zero.
Functionally zero, absolutely.
But if you peek behind that high-tech curtain, you'll actually find this massive contradiction.
Oh, a huge one.
Because somehow a multi-billion-dollar industry producing tomorrow's medical miracles is running a pretty significant portion of its operations on basically 19th century technology.
Which is wild to think about.
Right. We are talking about 3-ring binders, wet ink, and literal stacks of physical paper.
Stacks and stacks of it.
So today we are doing a deep dive into this hidden business trap that is silently bleeding pharmaceutical budgets dry. And we're basing this on some really phenomenal research by Omer Simon.
Yeah, the CEO and co-founder of Validfor.
Exactly. He wrote this piece called Paperless Validation ROI, Cost versus Traditional Methods.
It truly is a fascinating disconnect. You have these huge organizations developing next-generation therapeutics, yet the validation systems are, well, they're ancient.
Right, and validation is what actually proves to the regulators that the therapeutics are safe, right?
Exactly. It's an incredibly rigorous process to prove things are manufactured correctly, but it's often entirely reliant on, someone remembering to cap their ballpoint pen.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the core premise here is something I think a lot of us fall victim to, whether you're managing a global supply chain or honestly just trying to organize your home office.
Oh, for sure.
We look at a standard ream of printer paper and we think, hey, that costs what? $5?
Yeah, it seems like the ultimate low-cost, low-maintenance tool.
Right. But the reality that Simon's analysis reveals is that the true cost of paper has absolutely nothing to do with the paper itself.
No, not at all.
It is the friction-heavy, totally manual process that the physical paper demands.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the impact of that friction is staggering. For quality managers, engineers, and IT directors in the pharma world, maintaining a traditional paper-based validation system doesn't just mean a bigger budget for filing cabinets.
Which is what you naturally assume, right?
Yeah.
Just buy more cabinets.
Right. But it's so much worse than that. It manifests in vastly delayed product launches. It manifests in these endless, agonizing review cycles.
So that seemingly innocent $5 ream of paper ends up costing, what, hundreds of thousands of dollars?
Easily. Hundreds of thousands in lost time, largely because of what it forces highly skilled people to do on a daily basis.
Wow, and to understand that, we really need to look at the physical environment first. Like, before a tester even writes a single word on these documents, just moving them around the building is a logistical hazard.
Oh, completely.
The research breaks down the hidden physical costs. And sure, you have the obvious ones like industrial printers, specialized toner, binders.
Which add up, but yeah, they're just the tip of the iceberg.
Exactly, because it extends into actual premium real estate. We are talking about dedicated, climate-controlled, fireproof storage rooms.
Yep, and incredibly expensive off-site archiving facilities.
Because if that paper burns, your proof of compliance just burns with it, right?
Exactly. The paper is the product, in a way.
But the concept that really stood out to me from the article was what the author terms the sneaker net drag.
Ugh, the sneaker net. It is such a brilliant, highly evocative term for a remarkably frustrating reality in these facilities.
It paints such a vivid picture. So
Wow.
the sneaker net drag refers to the actual literal time that highly paid, highly educated validation engineers spend just walking.
Just walking around?
Or walking from desk to desk, floor to floor, building to building, literally just trying to get a physical wet ink signature on a piece of paper.
It's absurd when you really think about it.
It is. If you, listening to this, have ever had to chase down your boss in the hallway just to get a signature on a standard expense report, multiply that frustration by 1,000. That is the sneaker net.
It's exhausting.
When I read this, I immediately pictured like one of those terrible 1990s workplace sitcoms. You know the exact trope?
Oh, where someone's running around with a manila folder?
Yes, where the entire climax of the episode is the main character sweating through their suit, desperately sprinting around the office, peeking into conference rooms, listening to elevator music, just trying to find one specific executive to sign a form before the 5:00 p.m. deadline.
Right, and while that makes for good physical comedy on television, in a sterile manufacturing environment, it is a catastrophic waste of resources.
I can imagine.
I mean, you have personnel with advanced degrees in biochemical engineering, essentially acting as highly paid, highly stressed couriers.
It's a terrible use of their time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the financial drain of the sneaker net isn't just the physical walking. The real danger, the true hidden cost, is what happens when that engineer finally reaches the executive's desk and the executive happens to be out to lunch.
Or on a 3-day business trip.
Right. What do?
They just have to leave the binder sitting there.
They leave it there, and suddenly the whole system breaks down. This introduces a massive systemic vulnerability.
Judges.
The complete lack of visibility. When that physical binder is sitting on Dave's desk on the 3rd floor, it effectively exists in a black hole.
The black hole.
It is completely invisible to the rest of the organization. If you are a project manager trying to orchestrate a massive, time-sensitive product launch, you do not have a digital dashboard flashing red to warn you that a critical change request has been stalled for 48 hours.
It's just sitting under a coffee mug somewhere.
Exactly. The project just silently grinds to a halt.
So you are essentially flying blind. You just assume everything is moving along perfectly on schedule until the end of the week when someone finally remembers to ask, hey, did Dave ever actually sign off on that sterilization protocol?
Which means you are attempting to manage multi-million-dollar, highly regulated projects based on hope, memory, and random hallway encounters, rather than real-time, actionable data.
That sounds terrifying.
It is. The physical paper isolates information. It traps it.
So we've finally defeated the sneaker net. Let's say Dave gets back from lunch. The binder has arrived at his desk, and he actually has a pen in his hand. The friction doesn't stop there, does it?
Not at all.
Because the next major trap is the workflow itself. What actually happens the moment physical ink hits physical paper during the day-to-day execution of these validation tests?
Well, this is where we see the most significant daily hemorrhage of capital. The analysis categorizes these workflow losses into 2 main areas:
Okay, what are they?
execution time and review cycles. And execution time is particularly brutal in a paper paradigm.
Okay, let's explore that. Because in a traditional setup, the testers who are validating this really complex machinery have to handwrite every single result.
Every single one. By hand.
And if they're running a test and a step fails, they can't just hit backspace. They can't click an undo button.
No, definitely
They
not.
have to physically stop the test, write out a highly detailed, formal deviation note entirely by hand, and in a lot of cases, they might actually have to scrap the page and restart the entire documentation process from scratch.
Which just destroys your timeline.
But when companies switch to a paperless validation lifecycle management system, a VLM, they unlock these intelligent software features.
Yeah, the digital tools change everything.
Testers can securely copy and paste repetitive data. The system utilizes automated deviation management that instantly flags anomalies and guides the user through the correction protocol.
It basically holds their hand through the process.
Right. And the research highlights that simply by digitizing this immediate execution phase, the process becomes 30 to 40% faster.
Just think about the compounding effect of a 30 to 40% efficiency gain across hundreds of testers over an entire fiscal year.
That's a lot of recovered time.
It is a staggering return on investment for any organization, but it is especially critical for one bound by incredibly strict regulatory launch timelines.
No, I have to push back on this just a little bit because I want to put myself in the shoes of a skeptical listener who might be thinking about their own daily habits.
Sure, let's hear it.
In my own life, isn't it usually just as fast, sometimes even faster, to just jot down a quick note with a pen on a physical clipboard than it is to walk over to a workstation, authenticate a secure login, navigate through a software module, and type out a finding?
I see where you're going with this.
Right. I mean, writing a quick note is virtually instantaneous.
What's fascinating here is that you are applying standard, everyday consumer logic to a highly regulated pharmaceutical environment.
Yeah.
And in that environment, standard logic completely disintegrates.
Really? Why?
Because of something called good documentation practices, or GDP.
GDP. Break the reality of that down for us, because it's not just taking notes in a meeting.
Not at all. In our daily lives, like you said, jotting down a quick note works perfectly. If you are writing a grocery list and you scribble out a misspelled word or use an abbreviation only you understand, it doesn't matter.
Right, I still know to buy milk.
Exactly. But in pharmaceutical validation, the concept of a quick note simply does not exist. Every single mark on that piece of paper is a legally binding record that is subject to federal scrutiny.
Wow. Every mark.
Yes, GDP dictates incredibly strict, unforgiving rules for how humans interact with that paper. If you make a mathematical error or even just write the wrong date, you absolutely cannot use whiteout.
No whiteout. Got it.
And you cannot scribble heavily over the mistake either.
Because an auditor needs to see what was originally written to ensure you aren't hiding anything, right?
Precisely. So, to correct a minor error under GDP, you must draw a single, clear line through the incorrect entry so it remains legible.
Okay, single line.
Then, you must write the correct entry next to it. You must initial the correction. You must write the current date next to your initials.
Seriously.
And, crucially, you must provide a documented reason for why the change was made in the first place. All of that manual effort for a single slip of the pen.
Wow. Okay, so there is absolutely no scribbling in the margins, no shorthand, no casual corrections. The rigidity is just extreme.
It is. And that extreme rigidity leads directly into the second major workflow loss the author highlights: the review cycles.
Because people make mistakes.
Exactly. At the end of the day, humans are fundamentally fallible. We get tired, we get distracted.
Yeah, especially at the end of a long shift.
Right. A tester at the end of a 12-hour shift might forget to write the year next to their signature. Or their handwriting might just be slightly too rushed and illegible.
So what happens then?
Well, when that massive binder finally makes its way through the sneaker net to the quality reviewer, and that reviewer spots one single missing date, they cannot just pick up a pen and fill it in for the tester.
Wait, even if they know exactly what the date is supposed to be.
Even if it's glaringly obvious, doing so would be a massive compliance violation. They have to send the entire document back.
Oh, man. Which triggers what the author calls the ping-pong effect.
Yes, the ping-pong effect. The reviewer rejects the binder. It goes back into the sneaker net to find the original tester.
So back to walking the halls.
Yep. The tester has to physically locate the document, review the error, perform that whole single-line correction protocol, initial it, date it, provide the reason, and then
They'll tell me.
the binder goes back into the sneaker net to find the reviewer again.
That is maddening.
It is. That one missing date, which would take 2 seconds to type into a computer, creates a ping-pong effect that routinely adds days, sometimes weeks, to a project timeline, simply because the document is bouncing back and forth across the facility.
But with a modern paperless VLM system, the software fundamentally changes the rules of engagement, right?
Completely.
The system simply will not let you proceed if you break protocol. It automatically enforces mandatory fields. Like if you try to submit a completed test step, but you forgot to fill in a required date or attach a specific piece of evidence, the submit button just remains grayed out.
Which is brilliant.
The system literally forces compliance in real time. It virtually eliminates those frustrating GDP errors before the review cycle even begins.
Right. It shifts the burden of compliance from human memory to software architecture. You're no longer hoping your staff remembers the rules. The system physically prevents them from breaking them.
So speeding up that daily execution and stopping the endless ping-pong effect is obviously a massive win for a company's bottom line.
Huge win.
But in the pharmaceutical industry, the ultimate test of a system's value isn't just how smoothly it runs on a random Tuesday afternoon.
No, the true test is what happens when extreme external pressure hits. Namely, a regulatory audit.
Which is everyone's nightmare.
Audits are the ultimate stress test. They are the moments that dictate whether a facility stays open or gets shut down entirely.
Here's where it gets really interesting, especially when we look at the search and retrieval process.
Okay, yeah.
Imagine you are listening to this, and it's tax season. Your accountant asks you for a very specific hardware store receipt from a home repair you did 3 years ago.
That sounds awful.
Right. If you use a paper system, you're going up to your attic, pulling down dusty shoeboxes and spending hours squinting at faded ink on hundreds of crumpled receipts, desperately hoping you didn't accidentally throw it away.
That is a perfect analogy for the traditional pharma method during an audit.
Exactly. You are sending staff down to a climate-controlled vault to spend days digging through physical archives, pulling heavy binders, and flipping through thousands of pages by hand just to find one specific signature.
It's pure panic.
But if you digitize your receipts, you just open your computer, hit CTRL-F, type in hardware store 2023, and it appears in milliseconds.
Exact.
That is the digital VLM advantage. It turns a multi-day panic into a 5-second keyword search.
And while that speed is a massive relief for the staff, the speed is actually a secondary benefit to what the auditor is truly evaluating.
Wait, really? What are they evaluating, though?
Well, when an FDA inspector or a regulatory auditor asks for a historical document, they aren't just looking for a piece of paper. They're looking for confidence.
Confidence in the system.
Right. They want absolute assurance that your data is pristine, untampered with, and reliable.
Which brings us to the massive strategic advantages of going digital. The source material points out that beyond just saving budget on printer toner, these systems offer audit readiness.
Right, meaning no one has a panic attack when the inspectors show up unannounced.
Exactly. There is also talent retention. Modern, highly skilled engineers do not want to work for a company that forces them to drown in archaic paperwork.
They want to use modern tools that let them do actual engineering.
But the most critical strategic advantage we really need to talk about is data integrity, and specifically a foundational concept known as ALCOA+.
Yes. LCOA Plus is arguably the most important acronym in pharmaceutical quality assurance.
Okay, let's break that down.
It represents the gold standard for data integrity. It stands for attributable, legible, contemporaneous, original, and accurate.
And the plus.
The plus represents a few modern additions, emphasizing that data must also be complete, consistent, enduring, and available.
Let's ground that in reality, because those are pretty heavy terms. So attributable means we know exactly who recorded the data.
Right.
Legible means anyone can read it without guessing.
Yeah.
But contemporaneous, that means the data was recorded at the exact moment the event actually happened, right?
Right. Yes, and the stakes for contemporaneous documentation are incredibly high. Let's say a tester is validating a commercial refrigeration unit designed to hold highly unstable vaccines.
Okay, high stakes.
Very. They need to record the internal temperature every 15 minutes. If they get busy, forget to write it down, and then try to fill in the log from memory 3 hours later at the end of their shift,
Oh, no.
they might write down that the temperature was stable. But if they are remembering incorrectly, and there was actually a 10-minute temperature spike, that entire batch of vaccines could be compromised.
Wow.
And if that bad batch makes it to the public because of a non-contemporaneous memory-based entry, the consequences are catastrophic. That is why auditors demand proof that the data was recorded in the moment.
Now think about the sheer arrogance of trying to guarantee LCOP Plus on physical paper. You are relying 100% on human discipline.
Which is terrifying.
You are crossing your fingers and hoping that every single tester, across every single shift, 365 days a year, never gets tired, never gets sloppy, never relies on their memory, and never forgets to write down a timestamp.
Which is a statistical impossibility. Humans are not machines. We experience cognitive fatigue.
Exactly.
But the brilliance of a digital validation system isn't just that it stores data efficiently. It is that the LLCOA plus principles are explicitly coded directly into the software's DNA.
It basically automates the trust.
It absolutely does. Let's look at the mechanics of how it does that. To ensure an entry is contemporaneous, the system uses server-side automated timestamping.
So no one is looking at a wall clock.
Right. The moment a tester enters a value, the software stamps it to the millisecond. The user physically cannot alter that time, unlike a handwritten note.
That's bulletproof.
To ensure it is attributable, the software requires a secure, individualized login, maybe even biometric authentication. The system knows definitively who is at the keyboard.
And for legible.
It relies on standardized digital text rather than deciphering someone's rushed cursive. The software doesn't ask humans to be disciplined. It enforces the discipline systemically. And that structural guarantee of pristine data is what keeps quality directors sleeping soundly at night.
That is a fundamental paradigm shift. It moves an entire organization from a defensive posture of, like, I hope my team remembers all the rules today, to an offensive posture of, the architecture of our system physically will not allow the rules to be broken.
It's a game changer.
So if this digital software is essentially a magic bullet for compliance, if it cures the daily headaches, completely eliminates the ping-pong effect of review cycles, and turns a terrifying audit into a 5-second keyword search, My immediate question is, why on earth is anyone still buying three-ring binders?
It's a fair question.
Why hasn't every single facility made the switch yesterday?
The barrier is almost always psychological. Specifically, it is the fear of the upfront sticker shock.
Right. Enterprise software licenses are not cheap.
No, they aren't.
Implementing a massive new digital platform takes significant budget approval, training, and a temporary disruption to current workflows. But the research gives us a phenomenal, highly practical business case to prove why the cost of doing nothing, the cost of sticking with the cheap paper, is actually astronomically higher.
It really is.
Let's walk through the mechanics of this ROI math because it completely changes the perspective. The first step the author suggests is calculating your current annual cost. And it's not just about adding up the receipts from the office supply store.
No, you have to look deeper.
You take the number of validation projects you run annually, multiply that by the average hours spent per project, and multiply that by the hourly rate of the personnel involved.
And crucially, Simon points out that organizations almost always fail to calculate the waiting time costs into that equation.
The waiting time. This is the invisible killer. Explain the mechanism of how waiting time drains the budget.
It goes all the way back to the black hole on Dave's desk. Dave, if you have a highly paid quality engineer who has finished their portion of a project, but they cannot proceed to the next phase because they are waiting on a physical binder to make its way through the sneaker net for a signature, that engineer is effectively stalled.
So what are they doing?
They might be answering emails or doing lower value administrative work, but in terms of moving the critical path of the project forward, they are burning cash while generating zero momentum. Capturing that lost time is essential to understanding your true baseline cost.
Wow. And once you have that massive, somewhat depressing baseline number, you move to step 2, estimating the paperless savings.
This is the fun part.
Right. The research points out that, based on industry benchmarks, transitioning to a digital VLM system results in a highly conservative 30% reduction in total man-hours.
3%.
That means an entire third of your highly skilled workforce's time is instantly freed up to do actual valuable engineering instead of chasing paper.
And that 30% is just the direct labor savings. It doesn't even factor in the hard capital saved by eliminating those climate-controlled storage vaults.
Good point.
Or the massive revenue generated by getting a new pharmaceutical product to market weeks or months earlier, simply because the review cycle didn't stall out.
Which leads us to the final step, the ROI equation itself. You take the cost savings generated by that new 30% efficiency, subtract the upfront cost of the enterprise software license, and then divide that by the cost of the license.
And when companies actually sit down and run these specific numbers, the results are deeply eye-opening.
I bet.
The analysis shows that for most pharmaceutical companies, the break-even point on that expensive software license is reached in less than 12 months.
Less than a year.
Less than a year. In many scenarios, the pure efficiency savings from executing just one major validation project are enough to cover the entire annual cost of the software.
That's incredible.
This raises an important question for any leadership team that is currently sitting in a boardroom reviewing their operational budget. If the break-even point is achieved in under 12 months, and every single subsequent year represents pure efficiency gains and massive risk reduction, why are you hesitating?
Right. What are you waiting for?
The author's concluding point is exceptionally sharp. Implementing paperless validation is no longer a luxury reserved for the top-tier pharma giants with endless budgets. It has become a baseline necessity for survival and competitiveness.
That makes perfect sense.
If your competitor is getting their life-saving drug to market 3 months faster than you, simply because their engineers aren't playing ping pong with physical binders, you are losing market share permanently.
So what does this all mean? Let's bring this entire journey together. We started by looking at a simple, ubiquitous ream of paper, and naturally assuming it was a cheap, effective tool.
A classic mistake.
But we've uncovered that the physical paper is actually the catalyst for the sneaker net forcing brilliant engineers to run around a facility like panicked couriers. We've seen how it creates the ping pong effect, where a single missing date from an exhausted tester derails a timeline for weeks.
And costs thousands of dollars.
Exactly. And we've seen how it creates massive vulnerability during audits, because paper relies entirely on flawless human discipline, rather than having the ALCOA plus principles of data integrity baked directly into the software's DNA via server-side timestamps and secure digital authentication.
The central unifying lesson here is about evaluating friction.
Yes. When you are evaluating the tools you use, Whether you are running a multinational pharmaceutical laboratory or just trying to optimize your own small business, the true cost is almost never the literal price tag of the raw material.
No, it rarely is.
It is entirely about the cost of the friction that the material creates within your workflow. Paper is a high-friction environment. Digital, when implemented correctly, is a low-friction environment.
And if we take that core lesson a step further, think about the fundamental vulnerability we've been discussing today.
The reliance on human discipline.
Exactly. The pharmaceutical industry is one of the most heavily regulated, high-stakes, meticulously scrutinized fields on the planet. And even they are waking up to the stark reality that human discipline is simply too fragile and too risky to rely on for absolute data integrity.
It's a setup for failure. I mean, humans aren't built for that kind of rigid perfection.
We really aren't. So for you listening to this right now, consider your own environment. Look at your own daily life or your team's workflow at the office. What vulnerable, paper-based, or highly manual processes are you currently running that rely entirely on human discipline?
That's a great question to ask.
Where are you just crossing your fingers and hoping that people remember to do the right thing, remember to log the data, or remember to follow up, rather than building a resilient system that automatically ensures it happens? And more importantly, how much invisible time, energy, and money is that fragile hope costing you right now?
Suddenly, that 12-month break-even point on upgrading your systems sounds like the best deal in the world. We'll leave you to mull over that thought. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and we'll catch you on the next one.